Greetings from southern Germany, my friends, and welcome back to the channel. Before I begin, let me apologize for the fact that I am in a boring looking office. That is because my work schedule is really tight at the moment, and the only opportunity I'm going to have to film is on lunch breaks. And it also happens to be -2 degrees outside, -2 degrees Celsius. So of course I'm inside where it's warm. As you can tell by the title of this video, I'm going to be talking about the sex offender registries here in Europe. And I want to give a shout out to Vincent and Drogs. Hope I'm saying that properly. These two gentlemen contacted me and essentially pushed me into making this video. And I thank them for it. I have done my research because they prompted me, and here we are. Before we get into the registries of Europe, I would like us to look together at Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. This article is going to play very heavily in what we're going to talk about in the rest of this video as we review the countries that do and do not have sex offender registries here in Europe. Article 8 basically says, and I'm going to read this from my screen, everyone has the right to respect for his private and family life, his home, and his correspondence. I think that's rather self-explanatory, but let me point one thing out really quickly. Europe takes the right to privacy very seriously, which is why if you go on Google Maps and you go to virtually any city or town in Germany and you try to go to the street level, you know how Google Maps will let you drop the little guy and you can look at street level and look around. In most cities and towns in Germany, you cannot do that. And almost certainly you cannot do that with where private residences are at. And that's because European law will not allow Google Maps to put people's addresses or their pictures of their homes on the internet because of Article 8 of the European Convention. Makes you wonder how they're going to handle sex offenders or sex offense registration, doesn't it? Article 8 also says that a person's right to privacy can be invaded. It can be shaved away a little bit if there are good reasons such as public safety. So in Europe, they look at this balance between privacy on one hand and public safety on the other. Now, some countries weigh more toward public safety and away from privacy, and others weigh more toward privacy than public safety. Of course, in the United States and Australia, they have thrown privacy right out the window, and they're sold out on public safety. They don't care what happens to the sex offender for the rest of that person's life. That they might not be admitted to university or into certain neighborhoods, or that they can't travel, or that they can't get passports. That's just not a concern for the Americans and the Australians. Poland is the first country that we're going to look at, and that's because they have the only public sex offender registry in all of Europe. It's the only one where private citizens can go online and look people up to find out if there are sex offenders living in their neighborhood, or if their neighbors by name are convicted sex offenders. Poland was unapologetic when it enacted its law in admitting that it was following the lead of the Americans. Obviously, Poland is siding toward public safety as opposed to privacy. The question becomes, is that a violation of Article 8? Are they so much invading privacy that it's a human rights violation? And the answer is I don't know, because this law is written and published only in Polish. I have not been able to find an American or German translation. I don't know what the law actually says for itself. I don't know if there are restrictions placed on the freedoms of the sex offenders that are placed on this registry. I have no way of finding out. As far as I know, there are not restrictions placed on them. Their names and faces merely appear on this registry. I also cannot find where there is any requirement that these people register after their initial convictions. So I just don't have any information yet. If anybody out there does have that information or has access to something I don't, please let me know and I will update this video. But as far as I know, Poland is the only one. Let me also point out that the only way these laws can be challenged is if a sex offender who was on the registry in Poland decides to take it to court and challenge it. That's the only way this thing's gonna be heard. And I don't know if anybody's done that. Again, if anybody has information, pass that on to me. Now let's turn our attention to those countries that do have a registry, but it's private. You can see here the list on your screen. These are countries that do have sex offender specific registries, but those registries are not public. They are only available to law enforcement and courts. Nobody can look up their neighbors. Nobody can look up to anybody by name. And certainly they're not going to publish that information. This really, in my view, is no different than a standard convicted felon registry. Now, all European countries have convicted felon registries, and they generally are for a limited amount of time. Now, here in Germany, as I've said more than once, the maximum time is 10 years. And on the first day after 10 years in Germany, that entry for that person is deleted from the system, like it never happened. Each country is going to have its own standards for that, but they're basically going to follow the German lead on that one. So, yes, these countries have registries for sex offenders, and as far as I know, they do not have restrictions on individual freedoms of people. Now, let me point out that Spain and Portugal, for instance, have no requirement, specifically no requirement that someone register after that first initial conviction. There is no, you have to come back once a year and register and give a new, an updated address or a fingerprint or a photograph. There's nothing like that. Let me also point out that Spain tried to create a European Union-wide sex offender registry. And actually, the EU voted that down and said no. So there was an affirmative decision not to have a European-wide sex offender registry. Let's talk about the UK for just a moment since they're on the screen. The UK has a private registry, meaning it's for law enforcement and courts. But as far as I can tell, there are a great many restrictions being placed on sex offenders there. One of the things that really disturbs me in the UK is that convicted sex offenders have to provide to the courts information on their bank accounts, where their bank accounts are at, how many bank accounts they have, how much money is in the bank accounts. And I've really put some effort into thinking that one through, and I can't find a legitimate reason for the British government to need that information on sex offenders. You know, the UK follows almost everything the United States does. They're like a little puppy dog that follows the US everywhere. So I am concerned about the UK and the direction that they're beginning to take. As you probably know, the UK is pulling out of the EU. And so I don't know what's going to happen with the UK, but I'm concerned. I know that we have some viewers that are in the UK that are under this registry. So if you guys want to provide us some information, send it to the Common Sense Laws website. I'd be interested in reading it. I'd be interested in learning it and possibly updating this. The next group that we're going to look at are those countries that do not have sex offender registries at all. Yes, they have convicted felon registries for a limited number of years, but there is no specific registry for sex offenders. These are the countries that have specifically opted for privacy over public safety. They have determined, and I'm going to get into very specific examples in just a moment, they have determined that privacy is necessary in order for folks coming out of prison or out of the judicial process after a conviction. Privacy is necessary for them to rehabilitate their lives and reintegrate into society, and that is the better option for public safety. That's what these that's what these countries have determined, and they're standing by it. Let's look at some specific examples because I find this extremely interesting. Let's look at Finland first. Finland is a country that actually considered a sex offender registry, and they investigated, they thought about it, they argued about it in their parliament, and they ultimately determined that Finland did not need a sex offender registry, and as far as I can tell right now, they still don't have one. This is a country that affirmatively decided against having a sex offender registry. Looking at the Netherlands next, you will see that in 2012, the Netherlands actually tried to have a registry. Now, here's what's fascinating. When they started their registry, they actually made a statement saying, all the data that we have seen in the United States leads us to believe that these sex offender registries are not effective, that they do not improve public safety, that they do not prevent crimes. Now, the Dutch government actually said that out loud, but they said, nonetheless, we're going to try. We're going to test to see if a registry has any effect on public safety. So they made their attempt, And sure enough, they determined that, nope, this doesn't work. This is a waste of resources. It's just a waste of time. And so they ultimately killed the program. And as far as I can tell right now, the Dutch government does not have any sex offender registry. Sweden is next up, and I'm highlighting them because I find this extremely interesting. The Swedish government did not have a sex offender registry, but inside of Sweden, a private company started a sex offender registry and started publishing that information on who had been convicted of sex offenses, where they live, blah, 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 blah. In 2014, the Swedish government actually initiated an investigation against this company because there had been complaints that publishing that information violated the privacy of those people who were on that list. Now, I cannot find any specific finding by the Swedish government concerning that investigation. I promise you that I'm going to continue to hunt for it. But as of today, the Swedish government continues to stand by privacy instead of public humiliation and public safety. Sweden continues to believe that rehabilitation is the path forward, not stripping people of their human rights. Finally, we're going to look at Iceland, which again, I think is an interesting situation. And I think it's interesting that 3 of the 4 countries I've just talked about are all in Scandinavia. The Minister of Justice for Iceland, whose name is here on your screen, I tried to pronounce it, but it's beyond me. You can type it into Google Translate, and Google Translate will pronounce it for you. I can't reproduce those sounds, so I'm not going to try to embarrass this woman. But the Minister of Justice in Iceland actually proposed to the legislature in 2018 that the protections that are afforded to sexual assault victims in court should be extended to include the sex offenders in court. In other words, if somebody is arrested for committing a sex offense, that information will never be made public, even in court filings, because that is counterproductive to rehabilitation and reintegration after these folks go through the criminal justice system. So Iceland is making a very affirmative choice to step away from sex offender registries and these ridiculous draconian restrictions on the freedoms of sex offenders, and they are opting for privacy, rehabilitation, and reintegration. Now, so I say all this, and I point out these countries because a lot of you have expressed concern that European countries have sex offender registries and that the path forward for Europe looks like it's going to be going toward registrations. I'm telling you that that just doesn't seem to be the case. Yes, there is Poland, which, you know, is one of the lapdogs of the United States, and you have the UK, which again, another lapdog of the US. Those 2 countries are the outliers, and I need to quickly remind you that Poland has not been challenged in court yet. I don't believe the UK has been challenged in court either, but since they're moving out of the EU, I'm a little leery about expressing an opinion there. Let's also consider the fact that if you are a convicted sex offender in the United States and you move to Europe, there's no reason for you to be on the French registry or one of these other registries, or the Austrian registry. There's no reason for you to be there unless you come to Europe and commit a crime. And if you come to Europe and commit a crime, well, you're just going to have to pay the price for that. That absolutely should not be your intent in coming here. Europe should be the place that you come if you're looking to reestablish yourself, if you're looking to create a meaningful, positive life for yourself and leave your mistakes behind you. So I say again, the registry should not be a concern to you. I don't see a trend in Europe moving toward the registry. Too many countries have affirmatively said, no, we're not going to do that. So as ever, I hope this video is informative for you. I hope it was interesting to you. My English is horrible today. And I really hope it encourages you. So if I missed anything, if I'm missing details, or if anybody can provide additional information, I very much would like to hear it. And please let me again thank Vincent and Drogs for recommending this video. And I thank those who are supporting us through Patreon with financial support. I thank them also for making this video possible. So until next time, Please let me remind you that if you're not happy with your situation, then I suggest you do something about it. Until next time, ciao.